Abduction and introduction. The night sky of a New York City blazed with an eerie green light. Mark Evans, a 28-year-old software engineer, squinted up at the bizarre phenomenon as he walked home from a late night at the office. Was this some kind of new advertisement gimmick? A meteor shower? Before he could ponder further, a beam of light engulfed him. Mark felt weightless, his feet lifting off the ground. Panic gripped him as he realized he was being pulled upward, away from the familiar streets of Manhattan. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. In a blink, Mark found himself in a vast, sterile chamber. The walls pulsed with a faint bluish glow, unlike any material he'd seen on Earth. As his eyes adjusted to the new surroundings, he noticed several tall, slender figures observing him from behind what appeared to be a force field. One of the beings stepped forward. Its skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting between shades of blue and purple. Large, almond-shaped eyes regarded Mark with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Human, the alien spoke, its voice resonating in Mark's mind rather than his ears. You have been chosen for a great purpose. I am Queen Zara of the Galactic Nilari Empire. You will serve as a companion and teacher to my daughter, Princess Lyra. Mark's mind reeled. This had to be a dream, right? Some kind of elaborate prank. But the cold metal floor beneath his feet and the alien sense filling his nostrils felt all too real. I don't understand, Mark stammered. Why me? I can't just leave my life behind. Queen Zara's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand, human. This is not a request. It is an imperial decree. You will educate my daughter about your species, your cultures, your peculiarities. In return, you will be granted knowledge and experiences beyond your wildest imagination. Before Mark could protest further, two guards flanked him. Their touch was surprisingly gentle as they guided him through winding corridors of the massive ship. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen, organic shapes that seemed to flow and pulse with energy. They arrived at an ornate door that slid open silently. Inside was a chamber that defied Mark's understanding of physics. It seemed to stretch endlessly, with floating platforms and shimmering waterfalls that flowed upward instead of down. In the center of this impossible room stood a young woman, or at least, a being that resembled a young woman. Her skin had the same iridescent quality as the Queen's, but with hints of gold and rose. Her eyes, a swirling vortex of stars, fixed on Mark with unbridled curiosity. Princess Lyra, one of the guards announced, your human companion has arrived. Lyra approached Mark, circling him with a grace that seemed almost feline. Fascinating, she murmured. I've studied your kind extensively, but to see one up close. She reached out, running a finger along Mark's arm. He shivered at the touch, feeling a spark of energy pass between them. I'm not some specimen for you to study, Mark said, finding his voice. I have a life, a job, people who will miss me. You can't just abduct someone and expect them to be okay with it. Lyra tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. But we've given you such an opportunity. The chance to see the wonders of the universe, to learn secrets your scientists can only dream of. Why would you not embrace this gift? Mark sighed, realizing the cultural divide he was facing. Look, on Earth, we value free will, personal choice. You can't force someone into a situation like this, no matter how amazing you think it is. The princess considered his words. Intriguing. This concept of free will, it's not one we encounter often in the Empire. Most beings understand their place and purpose from birth. But perhaps this is why my mother chose you. To challenge my understanding. Over the next few hours, Lyra bombarded Mark with questions about Earth, human society, and his personal life. Despite his initial resistance, Mark found himself drawn into the conversation. The princess's genuine curiosity and quick intellect were engaging, and he couldn't deny the thrill of explaining concepts that were so familiar to him, yet utterly alien to her. As they talked, Mark began to notice subtle changes in the room around them. The colors shifted to match their mood, and small holographic displays appeared, illustrating their topics of discussion. It was as if the very environment was an extension of Lyra's mind. "This is incredible," Mark admitted, gesturing to a miniature representation of the Milky Way galaxy that hovered between them. "How does it work?" Lyra smiled, pleased by his interest. "It's a combination of our bioengineering and quantum entanglement technology. The rune is attuned to my neural patterns, responding to my thoughts and emotions. With time, it will attune to you as well." Mark's scientific curiosity began to override his fear and resentment. The potential knowledge he could gain here was staggering, but a pang of homesickness reminded him of the life he'd been torn from. "Lyra," he said softly, "I understand that this is an amazing opportunity, but you have to understand, I didn't choose this. There are people back on Earth who will be worried about me. My family, my friends, they'll think I've disappeared, or worse." The princess's expression softened. I hadn't considered that. In our society, individual bonds are not as strong. We serve the Empire, first and foremost." She was quiet for a moment, then her eyes lit up. "Perhaps we can find a way to send a message to your loved ones, to let them know you're safe." Mark felt a glimmer of hope. "You'd do that. It wouldn't interfere with your mother's plans." Lyra grinned mischievously. "What my mother doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, isn't bending the rules a bit part of that free will you mentioned?" For the first time since his abduction, Mark laughed. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to navigate this bizarre situation. And who knew? Perhaps he could teach these aliens more than they bargained for about humanity, its resilience, its adaptability, and its unwavering spirit. As the artificial day cycle of the ship began to dim, simulating evening, Lyra showed Mark to his quarters. The room was a marvel of alien technology, with surfaces that seemed to anticipate his needs before he even realized them. A bed materialized from the wall, adjusting its firmness as Mark sat on it. "Rest now, Mark of Earth," Lyra said. "Tomorrow, we begin your formal introduction to the Nilari Empire. There is much for you to learn, and much for me to learn from you." As the door slid shut behind her, Mark lay back on the bed, his mind swirling with the events of the day. He was billions of miles from home, in the heart of an alien empire, tasked with educating a princess about humanity. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly surreal. But as sleep began to claim him, a determined thought crystallized in his mind. He would find a way home somehow. And in the meantime, he'd show these Nilari exactly what humans were capable of. They wanted to learn about humanity. Well, class was in session. The adventure had only just begun. Cultural clashes and unexpected bonds. As the ship's artificial dawn broke, Mark awoke to a symphony of alien sounds. Chirps, whistles, and melodic hums filled the air, a far cry from the typical alarm clock. He sat up, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous day came rushing back. "Good morning, Mark of Earth," a disembodied voice chimed. "Princess Lyra awaits you in the Nexus chamber. Your attire has been prepared." Mark glanced at the wall, where a panel had slid open to reveal a sleek, form-fitting suit. It shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, reminiscent of the Nilari's skin. As he put it on, the material adjusted to his body, feeling like a second skin. Well, he muttered to himself, when in Rome, or I guess, when in an alien empire. The corridors seemed to shift and rearrange as he walked, guiding him effortlessly to his destination. The Nexus chamber was a vast, spherical room with swirling holographic displays covering every surface. At the center stood Lyra, her eyes closed in deep concentration. "Ah, Mark," she exclaimed, her eyes snapping open as he entered. "I hope you're ready for a crash course in galactic politics and Nilari culture." Over the next few hours, Mark's mind was bombarded with information. The Nilari Empire, he learned, spanned thousands of star systems, encompassing hundreds of alien species. The Nilari themselves were a relatively young race, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a few centuries ago. Their rapid expansion was due to their unique ability to adapt and integrate other species' technologies. "So, you're basically space magpies," Mark quipped. At Lyra's confused look, he explained the Earth bird's habit of collecting shiny objects. Lyra laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "An apt comparison, but we don't just collect. We improve, combine, create something new. It's why we're so interested in humanity. Your species has shown remarkable ingenuity despite your technological limitations." As they delved deeper into Nilari society, Mark began to notice some troubling aspects. The Empire's hierarchy was rigid, with little room for social mobility. Species were categorized based on their perceived usefulness, with the Nilari at the top. "But that's not right," Mark argued. "You can't just decide a whole species is inferior because they don't fit your criteria. What about individual potential, diversity, the ability to surprise and innovate?" Lyra frowned. "It's how we've always done things. It brings order, stability." "It brings stagnation," Mark countered. "Some of humanity's greatest achievements came from the most unexpected places. By limiting yourselves to such a narrow view, you're cutting off countless possibilities." Their debate was interrupted by a chime. A holographic display materialized, showing Queen Zora's stern visage. "Daughter, I trust your education is progressing well." "Yes, Mother," Lyra replied, her posture stiffening. "Mark has been most illuminating." The Queen's gaze fell on Mark, making him feel like a bug under a microscope. "And you, human, are you fulfilling your purpose?" Mark straightened, meeting her eyes. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I think the learning goes both ways. There's a lot about humanity that might surprise you." A flicker of something, amusement, annoyance, crossed the Queen's face. "We shall see. Carry on." The hologram vanished. Lyra let out a breath she'd been holding. "You're either very brave or very foolish to speak to my mother that way." Mark shrugged. "Where I come from, questioning authority isn't just allowed, it's encouraged. It's how we progress." The princess was quiet for a moment. "Tell me more about that, about how humans progress." As Mark launched into explanations of human history, scientific revolutions, and social movements, he noticed a change in Lyra. She wasn't just listening, she was absorbing, questioning, challenging her own preconceptions. Days turned into weeks. Mark's lessons expanded beyond mere cultural exchange. He found himself teaching Lyra about human art, music, and literature. In return, she showed him wonders beyond his wildest dreams: zero-gravity gardens where plants grew in impossible fractals, chambers where thoughts could be turned into tangible holograms, and observatories that could peer into the heart of distant galaxies. One evening, as they sat in a simulation of an Earth forest, Lyra had been particularly fascinated by the concept of seasons. The princess turned to Mark with an unusually serious expression. "Mark, I think I understand now why my mother chose you. Why she thought it was so important for me to learn about humans." "Oh." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Do tell." Lyra plucked a holographic leaf, watching it dissolve between her fingers. "The Nilari Empire has grown complacent. We've become so convinced of our superiority that we've stopped looking for new ideas, new ways of thinking. But humans, you're constantly pushing boundaries, questioning everything, even yourselves." Mark nodded slowly. "It's not always easy. Sometimes it leads to conflict, to pain, but it's also how we grow." "I want to change things," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how. The system is so entrenched, and my mother, she wouldn't understand." Mark felt a surge of pride, mixed with a touch of worry. He'd come to care for Lyra, to see her as a friend. The idea of her facing the wrath of the Empire was terrifying, but he also knew that change often came at a cost. "Small steps," he advised. "Start with what you can control. Your own actions, your immediate sphere of influence. Change doesn't happen overnight." Lyra nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "You're right. and I think I know where to start. The next day, Lara introduced Mark to a group of young Nilari nobles and officials in training. To his surprise, she presented him not as a curiosity or a subordinate, but as an equal, a teacher with valuable insights to share. As Mark spoke about human history, philosophy, and culture, he saw the same spark of curiosity in their eyes that he'd first seen in Lyra's. Questions flew fast and furious, challenging not just human ideas, but Nilari assumptions as well. It was a small step, but a significant one. Seeds of change were being planted, and Mark realized that his captivity might have far-reaching consequences he'd never imagined. But as the session wound down, a commotion in the corridor caught their attention. Guards rushed past, their normally stoic faces etched with concern. "What's going on?" Lara demanded, stopping one of them. The guard hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "There's been an attack, Your Highness. A rebel faction has struck one of our outer colonies. The Queen has called an emergency council." Lyra's face paled. She turned to Mark, her eyes wide with fear and something else, a dawning realization. "I have to go. Stay here, please. I'll come find you when I can." As she hurried away, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The comfortable routine they'd established was about to be shattered. The universe, it seemed, had other plans for them both. In the tense hours that followed, Mark paced his quarters, his mind racing. He'd known, intellectually, that the Nilari Empire wasn't universally beloved, but the reality of conflict, of rebellion, brought the situation into sharp focus. When Lyra finally returned, her usual composure was shaken. "It's worse than we thought," she said, collapsing into a chair that materialized to catch her. "The rebels, they're not just fighting against us. They're using our own technology against us. Technology that was supposed to be impossible for them to access." Mark sat beside her, concern etched on his face. "What does that mean?" Lyra's eyes met his, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "It means, Mark, that we have a traitor in our midst. And my mother, she's convinced it has something to do with you." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Mark felt his heart race, realizing that his position, and possibly his life, was now in grave danger. But as he looked at Lyra, seeing the conflict and resolve in her eyes, he knew that they were standing on the precipice of something much bigger than either of them had anticipated. The cultural exchange that had begun as a simple order from an alien queen had evolved into something far more complex. Ideas were spreading, challenging the very foundations of the Nilari Empire, and now, with the threat of rebellion looming, Mark and Lyra found themselves at the heart of a galactic storm. As the ship's alarms began to blare, signaling a state of emergency, Mark made a decision. He'd been brought here against his will, but now he had a choice to make. Would he retreat, try to find a way back to the safety of Earth? Or would he stand with Lyra, fighting for change in a civilization that spanned the stars? The answer, he realized, had been clear from the moment he'd started teaching Lyra about human resilience and the power of questioning the status quo. With a determined nod to the princess, Mark rose to his feet. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "What's our next move?" Lyra's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. She stood as well, squaring her shoulders. "We find the truth," she declared, "and then, my friend, we change the course of an empire." As they hurried from the room, alarms blaring and the ship humming with frantic energy, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of his situation. He'd come here as a reluctant captive, and now he was willingly plunging into the heart of an alien political firestorm. But isn't that what humanity was all about? Adapting, evolving, rising to impossible challenges. As they raced through the corridors, Mark allowed himself a small, determined smile. The Nilari wanted to learn about humanity. Well, they were about to get one hell of a lesson. Rebellion stirring. The corridors of the Nilari flagship pulsed with an ominous red glow as Mark and Lyra raced towards the command center. The ship's AI, usually a soothing presence, now blared urgent warnings in a cacophony of alien languages. "Lyra," Mark panted as they ran, "I need you to be straight with me. How bad is this situation, really?" The princess's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination. Worse than anything in living memory, the rebels have somehow obtained quantum-entangled stealth technology. They're striking multiple systems simultaneously, and we can't track them. They skidded to a halt outside the command center's towering doors. Lyra pressed her palm to a scanner, and the doors whoosh open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Queen Zara stood at the center of a holographic star map, her face a mask of cold fury. Dozens of red markers blinked across the display, each representing a system under attack. As she caught sight of Lyra and Mark, her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You dare bring the human here," she hissed. "For all we know, he could be working with the rebels." Mark stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Your Majesty, I understand your suspicion, but I assure you, I had nothing to do with this. In fact, I want to help." The Queen's laugh was brittle. "Help? What could a primitive human possibly offer in this crisis?" Lyra intervened, her voice ringing with a newfound authority that made several advisors turn in surprise. "Mother, you brought Mark here to teach us about humanity. Now is the time to listen. Humans have a history of overcoming seemingly impossible odds. Perhaps their perspective is exactly what we need." For a tense moment, the fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance. Then, almost imperceptibly, Queen Zara nodded. "Speak, human. But know that if your words prove false, the consequences will be severe." Mark took a deep breath, his mind racing. He thought of Earth's history, of underdogs and innovators who had changed the course of wars and revolutions. "Your Majesty, from what I understand, you're facing an enemy that's using your own technology against you, striking from the shadows. In human history, we've faced similar challenges. The solution isn't always to fight fire with fire." He stepped up to the holographic display, marveling for a moment at how his hand passed through the stars. "You're thinking like the Nelari, trying to out-tech, out-maneuver. But if these rebels have your tech, they'll always be one step ahead. Instead, why not try something they'd never expect?" The Queen's eyes glittered with interest. "Go on." "On Earth, we have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' Are there other species, other factions that have grievances against these rebels? Allies you've overlooked because they weren't technologically advanced enough?" A murmur went through the assembled advisors. Lyra's face lit up with understanding. "The Volrani," she exclaimed. "A species we've long dismissed as primitive, but their natural abilities, they're immune to our scanning technology." For the first time, a ghost of a smile flickered across Queen Zara's face. "Intriguing. Perhaps there's more to your species than I first thought, Mark of Earth." Advisor Kerthax opened diplomatic channels with the Volrani immediately. As the command center burst into renewed activity, Lyra pulled Mark aside, her eyes shining. "That was brilliant. You've bought us time, and possibly changed the course of this conflict." Mark allowed himself a small smile. "It's a start. But Lyra, we need to talk. These rebels, I can't help but feel there's more to this story. A lot of what you've told me about the Empire's policies, the rigid hierarchy, the suppression of other species' growth, it's the kind of thing that breeds resentment. Maybe it's time to address the root causes, not just the symptoms." Lyra's expression grew serious. "You're right, and I think I know someone who might be able to help us understand the rebels' perspective, but it's risky, very risky." Before she could elaborate, an alarm blared through the command center. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive rebel fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of the system. Queen Zara's voice cut through the chaos. "All hands to battle stations. Lyra, get yourself and the human to safety. Now." As they were ushered out of the command center, Lyra grabbed Mark's hand. "Change of plans. We're making a detour." They raced through the labyrinthine corridors of the ship, alarms blaring and crew members rushing past. Mark's heart pounded, adrenaline surging through his veins. This was far beyond anything he'd ever experienced, yet a part of him felt more alive than ever. Lyra led them to a small, unmarked door that Mark had never noticed before. She pressed her hand to it, and it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a tiny hangar bay containing a sleek, dart-like ship. A personal transport, Lyra explained as they climbed aboard. Untraceable, faster than anything the rebels have. We're going to find some answers. As the ship detached from the flagship and shot into the star-studded void, Mark felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. Where exactly are we going? Lyra's hands danced over the controls, her face set in grim determination. To meet an old friend. Someone who might be able to shed some light on why this rebellion started, and how we might be able to end it without further bloodshed. The stars blurred around them as the ship entered hyperspace. Mark watched in awe as entire galaxies streaked past like smears of paint on a cosmic canvas. Despite the dire circumstances, he couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Here he was, a human from Earth, about to play a role in a galactic conflict. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly surreal. Hours later, they emerged from hyperspace near a small, unremarkable planet. Its surface was a swirling mass of greens and browns, with no signs of advanced civilization visible from orbit. "Welcome to Terranix," Lyra said softly. "A world the Empire officially considers uninhabited, the perfect hiding place for someone who doesn't want to be found." As they entered the atmosphere, Mark gasped. The planet's surface was a riot of alien life. Massive tree-like structures towered into the sky, their branches intertwining to form a living metropolis. Creatures that defied description flitted between the branches, some glowing with bioluminescence. Lyra guided the ship to a landing pad seamlessly integrated into the living city. As they disembarked, a figure emerged from the shadows. He was tall, with 4 arms and skin that seemed to shift and change color like a chameleon. "Lyra," the alien said, his voice a melodious trill. "I wondered when you'd finally come." Lyra stepped forward, her posture tense. "Hello, Zix. It's been a long time." Zix's eyes, multifaceted like an insect's, focused on Mark. "And you've brought a human. How unexpected." Mark met the alien's gaze, fighting the urge to step back. "I'm Mark. I'm here to help if I can." Zix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Help? Oh, my dear human. You have no idea what you stumbled into. The rebellion, the Empire, the very fabric of galactic society, it's all built on lies. And the truth might just tear everything apart." As Zix led them deeper into the living city, Mark's mind raced. He'd come to the Nilari Empire as a reluctant teacher, then become an unexpected advisor. Now it seemed he was about to become something else entirely, a revolutionary. The living city of Terranix pulsed with an otherworldly energy as Zix led Mark and Lyra through winding pathways of bioluminescent flora. Creatures that defied description flitted past, some barely visible save for a shimmer in the air. This place, Mark breathed, awe evident in his voice. "It's incredible. How has the Empire not discovered it?" Zix's color-shifting skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "The Empire sees what it wants to see, human. Terranix exists in a fold of space-time, hidden from those who lack the imagination to look beyond their rigid understanding of reality." They arrived at what appeared to be a living structure, its walls pulsing gently like a giant heart. Inside, holographic displays flickered to life, showing star charts, data streams, and images of various alien species. "Welcome to the heart of the Resistance," Zix announced, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. "From here, we coordinate our efforts to dismantle the Empire's oppressive regime." Lyra tensed beside Mark. "Zix, what is this? You're part of the rebellion?" The alien's skin darkened to a deep blue. "I'm not just part of it, old friend. I'm one of its leaders, and it's time you learned the truth about your precious empire. Over the next few hours, Zix revealed a history that shattered everything Lyra thought she knew. The Nellari's rapid expansion hadn't been due to their adaptive abilities alone. They had systematically stolen and suppressed technologies from other species, keeping entire civilizations in artificial dark ages to maintain their dominance. But why? Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Why go to such lengths? Zix's expression softened. Power, my dear. The kind of power that corrupts absolutely. Your ancestors believed they had the right to shape the galaxy as they saw fit, and over time, that belief became a crushing boot on the neck of countless species. Mark listened, his mind reeling. He thought of Earth's own history, of empires and colonization, of the struggle for equality and justice. This goes beyond just overthrowing a government, he realized aloud. You're talking about restructuring an entire galactic society. Zix nodded approvingly. The human grasped it quickly. Yes, Mark of Earth, that is precisely our goal. But it's a monumental task, one that requires more than just military might. We need hearts and minds. We need... A symbol, Lyra interrupted, her eyes wide with sudden understanding. She turned to Mark. That's why my mother brought you here. Not just to teach me, but to be a catalyst for change. Mark's head spun. Me? But I'm nobody special. Zix made a trilling sound that might have been laughter. Oh, but you are human. You represent something the Empire fears more than any weapon, an idea. The idea that a supposedly primitive species could have value, could teach the mighty Nellari something new. It's a crack in the foundation of their entire worldview. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Mark thought of all the lessons he'd shared with Lyra, the questions he'd sparked in the young Nellari nobles. Had he been unknowingly sowing the seeds of revolution all along? Lyra's voice cut through his thoughts. What do we do now? I can't just pretend I don't know this. But I also can't betray my people, my mother. Zix's skin rippled with sympathy. The choice, young princess, is yours. But know this, the galaxy stands on the brink of monumental change. The actions we take now will echo through generations to come. Mark stood, feeling the weight of the moment. He thought of Earth, so distant now, and of the vastness of the cosmos. He thought of all the beings, known and unknown, whose lives hung in the balance of this conflict. I think, he said slowly, that it's time we gave the galaxy a choice. Not just the Nellari, not just the rebels, but every species out there. If we're going to reshape the future, we need to do it together. Lyra looked at him, a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes. How? Mark grinned, an idea forming. We're going to need a bigger classroom. Zix, how good are you at hacking galactic communications networks? As they began to plan, Mark felt a surge of determination. He'd been brought to this alien empire against his will, but now he had the chance to make a difference on a scale he'd never imagined. It wouldn't be easy, and the dangers were immense, but isn't that what humanity did best? Facing the impossible and finding a way through. The revolution was about to begin, and at its heart stood an unlikely trio, a disillusioned princess, a shape-shifting rebel, and a human teacher who'd traveled across the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. Battle for freedom. The plan was audacious, borderline insane, but it was the best shot they had at reshaping the galaxy without plunging it into all-out war. Mark, Lyra, and Zix had spent days fine-tuning every detail, knowing that the slightest misstep could spell disaster. Are you sure about this? Lyra asked, her voice tight with tension as they made final preparations aboard their stealth ship. Once we broadcast, there's no going back. Mark nodded, his face set with determination. Your people need to know the truth. All people in this galaxy do. It's the only way to break the cycle of oppression. Zix's skin rippled with anticipation as his 4 hands danced across the ship's controls. I've infiltrated the Empire's quantum entanglement network. We'll be able to broadcast simultaneously to every colonized world in the galaxy. It's now or never. Mark took a deep breath, centering himself. He thought of all the lessons in human history that had led to this moment: revolutions, civil rights movements, the power of truth in the face of tyranny. Let's do this. With a nod from Lyra, Zix activated the broadcast. Across countless worlds, on billions of screens and holographic displays, the familiar Imperial broadcast signal flickered and changed. In its place appeared the faces of a human, an Ilari princess, and a rebel leader. Mark spoke first, his voice clear and strong. "People of the galaxy, my name is Mark Evans. I'm a human from a planet called Earth, brought to the Nilari Empire against my will. But what I've learned here has shown me that the fate of my world and yours are intertwined. The empire you've known, the history you've been taught, is built on a foundation of lies." Lyra stepped forward, her regal bearing tempered with humility. "I am Princess Lyra of the Nilari. What this human says is true. Our empire, my family's legacy, has been one of suppression and theft. We've kept entire civilizations in darkness to maintain our power. But no more. It's time for change." As they laid out the truth, the stolen technologies, the artificial dark ages imposed on lesser species, the true nature of the rebellion, Mark could almost feel the shockwaves rippling across the galaxy. It was a moment of universal awakening, terrifying and beautiful in its intensity. Zix concluded their message with a call to action. "We stand at a crossroads. The old ways of domination and fear need not define our future. We call on all beings, from the highest echelons of the Empire to the most oppressed colonies, to join us in forging a new path. A path of cooperation, of shared knowledge and mutual growth." As the broadcast ended, alarms blared through their ship. "Multiple Imperial cruisers incoming," Zix shouted, his hands blurring over the controls. "They've tracked the signal." The ship rocked as energy weapons fire streaked past them. Lyra jumped into the co-pilot's seat, her royal training kicking in as she assisted Zix in evasive maneuvers. Mark strapped himself in, his heart pounding. He'd been in dangerous situations before, but nothing like this, a space battle with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. "We need to reach the rendezvous point," Lyra shouted over the din of battle. "The rebel fleet is waiting to extract us." Zix's skin flashed warning colors. "There's too many of them. We'll never make it through their blockade." Mark's mind raced, thinking of all the space battles he'd seen in movies and TV shows back on Earth. None of them had prepared him for the reality of hurtling through the void with death mere inches away. But then a crazy idea struck him. "Zix," he called out, "you said this planet exists in a fold of space-time, right? Is there any way we can use that to our advantage?" The alien's eyes widened with realization. "Theoretically, yes, but it's never been done with a ship this size. The energy requirements alone." "We don't have a choice," Lyra interjected. "Whatever it is, do it." Zix's hands flew over the controls, inputting a series of complex calculations. "Hold on to something. This is going to get weird." The ship suddenly lurched, and Mark felt as if his entire body was being turned inside out. The stars outside the viewport stretched and twisted into impossible shapes. For a moment that felt like an eternity, reality itself seemed to bend around them. And then, with a flash of light that seared itself into Mark's retinas, they were somewhere else entirely. The Imperial ships were gone, replaced by the welcoming sight of the rebel fleet. As they docked with the rebel flagship, exhausted but alive, Mark realized that their journey was far from over. The broadcast had been just the beginning. Now came the hard part, helping to build a new galactic society from the ashes of the old. The Rebel Command Center was a hive of activity. Beings from dozens of species worked side by side, analyzing data streams and coordinating efforts across the galaxy. At the center of it all stood Admiral Cora, a towering figure with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. "Welcome aboard," Cora's voice boomed as Mark, Lyra, and Zix entered. "Your broadcast has changed everything. We're receiving reports from all corners of the galaxy, uprisings, defections, calls for reform. The Empire is in chaos." Lyra stepped forward, her royal bearing still evident despite the weight of recent events. "What of my mother, the Imperial Core?" Cora's expression darkened. "Queen Zara has gone to ground. She's rallying loyalist forces for a final stand. The next few days will determine the course of galactic history." As they gathered around a holographic display of the galaxy, Mark felt the enormity of the situation wash over him. He was light years from home, involved in events that would shape the destinies of trillions. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly surreal. "So, what's our next move?" he asked, surprised at the steadiness in his voice. Admiral Cora's multifaceted eyes fixed on him. "You, human, have become a symbol, a catalyst for change. Your continued presence, your ideas, they're crucial to maintaining momentum." Zix nodded in agreement. "We need to show the galaxy a new way forward, not just tearing down the old system, but building something better in its place." Laura's face set with determination. "And I need to confront my mother, not just as a rebel, but as her daughter. There might still be a chance to end this without further bloodshed." As they formulated plans, incorporating ideas from Earth's history of revolution and reform, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. He'd been abducted as a curiosity, became an inadvertent rebel, and now stood at the cusp of reshaping galactic civilization. The next few days were a blur of activity. Mark found himself addressing delegations from newly liberated worlds, sharing human concepts of democracy, individual rights, and the importance of checks and balances. Laura worked tirelessly to win over former Imperial loyalists, her unique perspective bridging the gap between the old guard and the forces of change. But even as progress was made, the shadow of Queen Zara's loyalist fleet loomed large. Intelligence reports painted a grim picture. The Queen was preparing a devastating counterattack, one that threatened to undo everything they had accomplished. As the rebel fleet prepared for the final confrontation, Mark found a quiet moment with Lyra on the observation deck. The vastness of space stretched out before them, a glittering canvas of possibility. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. Lyra's eyes, once filled with naive curiosity, now shone with a hard-won wisdom. "I have to be. This is bigger than just me or my mother or even the Empire. This is about the future of all sentient beings." Mark nodded, feeling a swell of pride for how far she'd come. "Whatever happens out there, know that you've already changed the galaxy for the better. And Earth, well, when we make contact someday, we'll have you to thank for helping forge a more just cosmic community." A small smile played at Lyra's lips. "We couldn't have done it without you, Mark of Earth. Your people's history, your perspectives, they've given us a roadmap for a better future." As alarms began to blare, signaling the approach of the loyalist fleet, Mark and Lyra shared a look of understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it together, a human and an alien princess, united in the pursuit of a freer, more equitable galaxy. The observation deck filled with officers and crew, all eyes fixed on the approaching armada. At the center of the enemy fleet was Queen Zara's flagship, a behemoth of impossible geometry and raw power. Admiral Cora's voice cut through the tense silence. "All hands, battle stations. May the stars guide us in this, our final stand for freedom." As the rebel fleet moved to engage, Mark felt a strange calm settle over him. He was light years from home, about to participate in a battle that would shape the destiny of countless worlds. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly surreal. But isn't that what humanity was all about? Facing the impossible, adapting, overcoming. As energy weapons flared and ships clashed in the void, Mark allowed himself a small, determined smile. The Nilari had wanted to learn about humanity? Well, class was most definitely in session. The battle for the galaxy's future had begun, and at its heart stood an unlikely hero, a human teacher from Earth, ready to help write the next chapter in cosmic history. A new era begins. The vastness of space erupted into a kaleidoscope of destruction as the rebel and loyalist fleets clashed. Energy weapons lanced across the void, while swarms of fighter craft danced deadly ballets between capital ships. From the rebel flagship's bridge, Mark watched in awe and terror as the battle unfolded on a scale beyond human comprehension. Quantum shields at 60%, an alien officer shouted. Enemy flagship is targeting our power core. Admiral Cora's 4 arms worked furiously over holographic controls. Evasive pattern Delta 9. All ships, concentrate fire on their forward batteries. Beside Mark, Lyra's face was a mask of determination. We need to end this quickly. Every moment we fight, more lives are lost on both sides. Mark nodded, his mind racing. He thought of Earth's history, of wars won not just through force, but through strategy and unexpected tactics. What if we could talk to them? Not just the leaders, but every being in that fleet. Zix, monitoring communications, tilted his head curiously. What do you mean human? On Earth we have a concept called mass communication, Mark explained quickly. If we could broadcast to every ship, every soldier in the loyalist fleet, maybe we could convince them to stand down. Lyra's eyes widened. It could work. Many in the Imperial forces don't know the full truth. If we could reach them. Admiral Cora considered for a moment, then nodded. Do it, but make it quick. We won't last much longer under this barrage. As Zix worked to hijack the loyalist fleet's communication networks, Mark and Lyra prepared their message. The ship rocked with impact, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. Time was running out. We're in, Zix shouted, broadcasting now. Mark took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice carried to every corner of the embattled fleet. People of the Nilari Empire, this is Mark Evans of Earth. I know you've been told that we're terrorists, rebels seeking to destroy everything you've built, but the truth is far different. Lyra stepped in, her royal bearing lending weight to her words. I am Princess Lyra, daughter of Queen Zara. What we fight for isn't destruction, but liberation. The Empire has kept you, has kept all of us, in the dark about the true nature of our rule. As they laid out the truth, the suppression of other species, the hoarding of technology, the artificial limits placed on countless worlds, the intensity of the battle began to wane. Ship after ship in the loyalist fleet powered down weapons, crews turning against officers who tried to maintain the fight. On the massive view screen, Queen Zara's flagship loomed. For a tense moment, it seemed as if the Queen would order a final suicidal attack. Then, slowly, the great ship's weapons went dark. A hush fell over the rebel bridge, broken only by the beeping of incoming communication requests from surrendering loyalist ships. They had done it. The war was over. In the days that followed, the work of rebuilding began. Representatives from hundreds of worlds converged on a neutral space station to draft a new galactic charter. Mark found himself at the center of it all, sharing human concepts of democracy, individual rights, and the balance of power. It's not perfect, he explained to a gathering of alien diplomats. Earth still struggles with these ideas, but the key is to create systems that can grow, adapt, and correct themselves over time. Lyra, taking on the role of mediator between former imperial worlds and newly liberated species, nodded in agreement. We have a chance to build something truly remarkable here. A society that values diversity, that sees strength in our differences rather than fearing them. As the conference progressed, a new galactic structure began to take shape. It wasn't a single monolithic government, but a federation of independent worlds united by common principles. Technology and knowledge, long hoarded by the Empire, would be shared freely. A council representing all member species would make decisions that affected the galaxy as a whole, while individual worlds retained autonomy in local matters. Zix, now heading a task force to reverse the artificial dark ages imposed on many worlds, reported exciting developments. "We're seeing an explosion of innovation," he said, his skin flickering with excitement. "Species combining their unique perspectives with newly available technology. The next few decades will see advancements we can hardly imagine." But amidst the hope and progress, challenges remained. Queen Zara and a cadre of hardline loyalists had escaped, vowing to restore the old order. Fringe groups on some worlds resisted change, fearing loss of privilege or status, and the sheer logistics of reorganizing an entire galaxy's worth of societies were daunting. One evening, as Mark stood on the observation deck of the space station, watching ships from 100 worlds come and go, Lara joined him. "Quite a view, isn't it?" she said softly. Mark nodded, still awed by the cosmic tapestry before him. "I never imagined I'd be part of something like this. Back on Earth, I was just normal, nothing special." Lyra smiled. "But that's exactly what made you special, Mark. You showed us that extraordinary things can come from the most unexpected places. You gave us perspective we desperately needed." As they talked, a alert chimed on Lyra's communicator. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "It's from the Earth observation post we set up," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "They've detected radio signals. Your people are reaching out to the stars." Mark felt a lump form in his throat. Earth, so distant for so long, was taking its first steps into a larger universe. And thanks to the changes he'd helped bring about, humanity would be welcomed with open arms. "We should prepare a first contact team," Lara said, already making plans. "Representatives from multiple species to show Earth the diversity of the galaxy. And of course, you'll lead the mission." Mark's heart raced at the thought. He'd return home not just as an abductee with a wild story, but as an ambassador for a new galactic order. The challenges ahead were immense, helping Earth adapt to its new reality, integrating human perspectives into the galactic community, and continuing to build a more just and equitable cosmic society. But as he looked out at the star-studded expanse, Mark felt a sense of boundless possibility. Humanity's adventure among the stars was just beginning, and he would be there to help guide the way. "Well," he said with a grin, turning to Lyra, "I guess it's time for Earth to join the class. Think they're ready for their first lesson in Galactic Civics 101? Lyra laughed, a sound filled with hope for the future. "Ready or not, the universe awaits, and something tells me Earth is going to fit right in." As they left the observation deck to begin preparations for humanity's grand introduction to the cosmos, Mark couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought him here. From reluctant captive to galactic peacemaker, he had played a part in reshaping the very fabric of cosmic society. The stars beckoned, filled with endless possibilities, and humanity, with its unique blend of creativity, adaptability, and indomitable spirit, was about to take its place among them. The next chapter in the story of the universe was about to begin, and Earth would help write it. As the first contact team assembled, a mix of species that would have been unthinkable under the old empire, Mark felt a profound sense of pride and responsibility. He had been brought to the stars against his will, but in doing so, he had helped forge a path for his entire species to follow willingly, with hope and wonder. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity. The greatest adventure in Earth's history was about to unfold, and Mark Evans, once an ordinary teacher from New York, would be there to help guide the way. As their ship prepared to depart for Earth, carrying the promise of a new era of cosmic cooperation, Mark took one last look at the vastness of space. He thought of all the lessons he'd learned, all the challenges he faced, and all the incredible beings he'd met along the way. With a smile, he stepped aboard. Class was in session, and the universe itself was the classroom.